Thank you for being the hardcore that are in this morning to find out a little bit more about Asterisk and FreePBX. And this is, well, if it was on the screen, this would be my, there you go. This is my suggested agenda. A lot of big things have happened since the last SimCon, since last February. I wanted to tell you a bit about FreePBX, a bit about Asterisk, and also I wanted to talk about PJ SIP because it's come to my attention that certain people are still using the old SIP in Asterisk. And that's fine, but it is on extended support now, so it's not going to be there and supported forever. How does that sound? Is that okay? Yeah. Rough consensus? Excellent, fair enough. Now, I do like to do a little bit of personality testing when I'm here at SimCon, and I was thinking of going with the geometric test where you pick the shapes. Did we do that last year? You can't remember, can you? Well, in that case, we might as well go with that one, because I have built it in. It's very easy. This just helps you get to know each other just a little bit more. Now that we've all bonded a little bit last night, all you have to do is pick a shape. Just have one in the top of your mind. Has everybody chosen a shape? Good. Okay. All right. So, who are the triangles? Let's just pop your hands up if you're a triangle. Don't be shy. There's nothing wrong. Triangles. Ambitious and directed people. There you go. Simon was a triangle. They know where they're going and they know how to get there. You know, you usually got a plan in mind. Who are the squares? Again, don't worry about that at all. Fraser's a square. Look, keep your hands up, because these are the detailed, conscious and precise people. They like to colour right up into the corner, that kind of stuff. Who are the circle people? And I'm usually high percentage, keep your hands up, and I'm usually high percentage in an audience like this because they are the people. And you don't actually get that many people in the hardcore world of VoIP. Yeah, you can vouch for that, can't you? Yeah, indeed. Okay, and who are the squiggly lines? Keep your hands up. Very important group. They've got an unhealthy obsession. Keep your hands up. And it's either with Rachel Riley or it could be with open source communication. Yeah. Scored on both in that particular case with Jen at the back. Okay, well, fortunately, this presentation applies to all groups, you'll be pleased to hear. So here's the big news. September of last year, Sangoma acquired Digium. Digium was created by Mark Spencer, the founder, the sponsor, the primary developers of Asterisk, and now they've been acquired, or we've been acquired, I should say, by Sangoma. And you can see that the little Asterisk logo has found its way into the Sangoma logo, as in the shirt here. And so that's what happened, and that was quite big news because Asterisk is the world's most popular, most flexible, most dominant open source communications platform, and FreePBX is the world's most popular open source PBX implementation on top of Asterisk. And so for those two to come together under the same roof, that was quite big news. And it caused lots of questions to be asked. But it also meant that Asterisk is now inside a publicly traded company because Sangoma is publicly traded on the Canadian Stock Exchange. And it put Asterisk inside a corporate structure that's set to do about 100 million Canadian dollars. So, you know, it made things a lot bigger. Questions were asked, and in Astricon last year, that's me, I don't know, I didn't get captured looking that happy in that one, I don't know why. But this was an Ask Them Anything panel where we had Mark Spencer, the creator of Asterisk, Tony Lewis, COO of Sangoma, Matt Fredrickson, the lead for the Asterisk project. I've forgotten who that guy was now. Brian Walters, of course, from the FreePBX project, and Matt Jordan from Asterisk, from Digium. They were all there in an Ask Them Anything panel in the spirit of transparency and letting everybody, you know, ask what they wanted to do. And you can see it was a pretty well attended do. And so that all went off very nicely and people came away, including Simon and the SimCon team, with happy feelings about the way things are heading. Astricon is a great time for getting together, and you can see this group of people. This is a separate meeting at the beginning of Astricon. It's called Astrid DevCon. It's where the more serious software people get together to think about the direction of the Asterisk project. And this particular photo was one where we were asked to strike wild and crazy poses. And you can see the level of software engineeringness in there, can't you? That the only wild and crazy poses we managed for. And you, by the way, you can pick out Jared there. There's Dan and his wildest and crazy pose. And there you go. Look, there's Daniel from the award ceremony last night there as well. So that was a nice gathering. I just wanted to show that to you. So Sangoma, by virtue of the fact that they now own Digium, are the primary developer and sponsor of the world's two most widely used open source projects, Asterisk and FreePBX. And this was actually not predicted, but kind of alluded to in a talk that Bill Wignall, the CEO of Sangoma, gave in 2015 at Astricon, where he talked about the commitment to open source. And of course, that was a question that came up when Sangoma acquired Digium, was, is there a commitment to open source? And the answer is, yeah, Sangoma is 100% in on keeping Asterisk and FreePBX open source projects. And so today, the same question is asked. People wonder about these things, but the fact of the matter is that Sangoma is totally committed to keeping these two 100% open. And we now have two kind of finished product offerings as well. Sangoma had PBExact, Digium had SwitchVox. Both of these are finished products. They're turnkey solutions that are based on Asterisk, and they're still in the product mix. And they've both gone away into the kind of the collaboration side as well. And in fact, SwitchVox is multi-award winning for the GUI that's on it as well. WebRTC and all kinds of things in there. So those products are in the offering as well. So what about FreePBX? I'd like to talk about that first. Well, by the numbers, you can see it's very, very popular indeed. Just to pick out a couple of numbers, 131,000 average users per month, 1.3 million lines of code, lots of community contributions, 37,000 odd commits. You can see FreePBX is still a very, very vital, vigorous, ongoing open source project. And FreePBX 15 is the latest one. There's a couple of things that have been popped into it, and those are backup and restore. Of course, there was always a backup and restore, but it wasn't always across the different releases. And so we've added in the ability to make that a little bit more portable, and also new GraphQL and REST APIs as well. So the restore and backup, or backup and restore around the versions, as I said, the main thing there was just to make that a little bit more portable. There was an issue with the structures that made them, if you backed up in one, you couldn't always restore in the other, but we've opened that up a little bit, and it's made possible by allowing each module to be responsible for their own data during the backup and restore process. And it's actually quite granular as well. You can go down and backup and restore only the little bits that you'd like to. There's more information about that at the wiki, and one of the main messages I would like you to take away from this morning is, if you're looking for information either on Asterisk or FreePBX, hit the appropriate wiki. They're full of useful information. Lots of good stuff. And GraphQL, well, that's a query language for your API. It's finding its way into all sorts of different places, and now it's in FreePBX as well, and we've got documentation about that too. Okay, more information at the wiki, as I was saying. One other thing I wanted to talk about in FreePBX is FreePBX has a number of commercial modules that you can buy to go alongside it. And we've recently, because of the coming together of the two companies, popped the Digium phones into the free bit. So they are now freely available to be managed by the endpoint manager. You don't have to pay for anything there. And that puts them alongside the Sangoma phones as well. The Digium D series phones are probably the only phones you're going to come across that have a JavaScript API, so you can take control of the LCD screen and the soft keys below it. So you can write your own apps for inside the phone, which some people choose to do. The Sangoma phones, of course, have always been in that free endpoint manager situation. Okay, it's a community, so do get involved. There's all sorts of ways you can do that. Not just by using it, but by testing it, by documenting and getting involved, things like that. There's one other thing I wanted to mention, and that is that we do have a pre-built hosted solution. I put multi-tenant there and I got that word slightly wrong. A pre-built hosted solution. So if you were thinking to build your own, or you're in a situation where you were wanting to migrate to something a little bit pre-built, save you some time and trouble, there is that opportunity. And Richard, the man looking happy over there, would be the main man to talk to about those things. That's all I wanted to say about FreePBX. I wanted to come on to Asterisk, and by the way, I just remembered, you saw Fred yesterday. Well, Fred's wife is a baker, and she produced some rather lovely Camarillo cookies. And I like to give things away during presentations, and I just happened to have some of these from last week when we did a show in Fort Lauderdale. So if you do have any questions as we go along, do feel free to ask, and you may be rewarded with the Camarillo cookie. Very tasty from Fred and his wife there. Anyway, Asterisk update. just first of all, bit of a sort of a history thing first. Asterisk has been around for a long time, coming up for 20 years this very year. And it's since 1.0, we've had all sorts of things in there. And this is a good time to ask, who's using which version of Asterisk? Is anybody using Asterisk 11? Oh, okay. What other versions of Asterisk might people be using? 13. That's a brilliant answer, isn't it? In fact, I'm going to give out a few cookies just for the fact that people are using Asterisk 13, because it's actually a pleasant surprise. You're a 13 man, Ray. Are you a 13 man? Were you? Go lower, David. Yeah. Oh, yeah. Okay, we'll try that in a minute, and we'll give one to that gentleman as well. So, okay, below 11 then. 1.8. Oh, I've got a 1.8er in there. Goodness me, should really be off that by now, but I'm pleased that you're prepared to admit that.
It's not doing much.
In a public forum. Okay, 1.6.
That got me in the nuts, but
Yeah.
I might give that a whack before
Put your money away, it's included in the ticket price. That is. Yes. 1.6. Nobody prepared to. 1.4. Well, this is actually quite a respectable room then, really, isn't it? You are still using 1.4.
No, I know people still.
Okay. I'll tell you what, Ross. I'll give you a couple of cookies for knowing people that are using 1.4. Yes. Okay. Well, that's good. That's a lovely thing to be. Where you should be is on Asterisk 13. That's the best place to be at the moment. Or Asterisk 16. Asterisk 16 is also a long-term support release, as we'll come to in a moment. So that was just showing you what happened leading up to about Asterisk 14. In Asterisk 15. We had a few exciting things happen. Perhaps the most notable was the inclusion of an SFU for video. Can anybody tell me what SFU stands for?
Selective forwarding unit.
That's, well done, that Dan. Can somebody other than Dan? Oh, sorry. Can somebody other than Dan give us the difference between an SFU and an MCU in the video world? Excellent, that's right. The name SFU, Selective Forwarding Unit, it forwards channels. Yeah, and that actually makes it much more efficient because it doesn't have to do the work of combining them all together and rendering all the little faces into like a celebrity squares, or as they'd say in America, Brady Bunch type of configuration. So it means that the host that's doing that can be more efficient and do more of it. And that was one of the things that we built in to Asterisk in 15. And to demonstrate that, somebody actually put together a nice WebRTC video conference facility, just a prototype one. You can see that they didn't really go to town on the user interface, but it demonstrated what was doable. And also, as we come into Asterisk 16, we've got some WebRTC quality improvements, some API additions, and there's also some settings that you would have had to do, lots of individual ones to set up your WebRTC, and we've kind of conglomerated those into kind of a smaller space. And we added some improvements in Chan PJ-SIP. And I'm going to come on to PJ-SIP in a moment because I wanted to talk about that a little bit and give you a little bit more information. So why have we had to do the improvement of the video resilience? Well, as you know, video in and of itself is a little bit more susceptible to packet loss than audio is. Just losing an odd packet can have a significant effect. And in 15, it was all about just kind of getting video in there as the SFU in the first place. And so now we have an opportunity to optimize. We've also included a NAC, a negative acknowledgement. So there's a kind of a bit of handing back when things don't happen. In fact, this was I had mixed feelings yesterday about Jared telling you all about that networking stuff, because I had intended to tell you a joke about UDP, but I wasn't sure you'd get it. And by the way, I gave that in a UDP way, so I'm not worried about your response. Yes, as an add-on for that joke. Okay, we've also, yes, the NAC stuff, it's just continuing to explain the negative acknowledgement in there. And also the REMB, receiver estimated max bit rate, that's for the receiving element to go back and give a guess at what its receiving bit rate is, so that Asterisk as the SFU can work with it and give it the best video feed. The WebRTC improvements include updating the internal APIs to support multiple audio and video streams, and you can see there added support in the REST interface, the ARI, for the new SFU stuff. So really kind of bedding in the stuff that we've done in 15. If we look very briefly, I'll just talk about PJSIP before I come on to the releases. AsteriskCon 2017, somebody gave a talk, a guy called Flavio gave a talk about the relative efficiencies of SIP and PJSIP. And that led us to do a little bit of internal work to bring PJSIP up to a better efficiency in certain areas. And I'll come on to that in a moment. But just looking at this release list, you can see that it kind of goes LTS, regular release or standard release, LTS standard, and then 15 turned out was not an LTS. And this was because we'd baked in so much new stuff at the time we didn't feel ready to make it an LTS. And so the great news is that 16 becomes an LTS, and I'm sure you all know the difference between an LTS and a standard release. An LTS is where we don't tend to put any new stuff that's got significant break potential in it, but we do keep it up with bug fixes, security patches and the like, whereas a standard release is one where we're more like to throw things in on an ongoing basis. So with 16 is an LTS. It was released last October, and there's a couple of details about it up there. But here's a very exciting thing, especially if you're Dan, and it was Dan that told me about this. I didn't actually know it had happened. It's 2 days ago, or 3 days ago. For web devs now, you can actually initiate an ARI application in Asterisk without getting involved in the dial plan at all. You'll perhaps remember that originally you had to bring the call in, just do a couple of little things, and then you could hand off. Well, now you don't even need to do that. There's some automatic machinery behind the scenes to do that for you. Okay, so I didn't see any hands go up for 11, which was quite surprising, but 11 is somewhere you should be moving away from for now. Do keep track of what's happening in the releases as you go along, because, you know, if it's mission critical for you, and I assume it probably is, it's good to keep up to date with what's going on in these releases. So really the last part of what I wanted to say is actually more about PJSIP. How many people are using PJSIP at the moment? Like 3 in the room. Okay, all right. Well, as it says here, PJSIP is the future of SIP in Asterisk. And there's a few different reasons for that. One of them is that, just going back to ChanSIP, Mark Spencer did an excellent job of creating ChanSIP back in 1999, and it's been incrementally worked on since. But it's ended up being a rather large monolithic piece of code. You can see there are over 35,000 lines of code. And what that meant was, what tended to happen is when we needed to make modifications, you'd go in at this corner and tinker with something, and it would break something over here because it wasn't particularly modular. Although it's, you know, served its purpose well and is obviously doing well because you all are still using it by the sound of it, it was time to move on. And so 5 years ago, we looked around at what SIP stacks were available, looked at things like Reciprocate, Sophia SIP, and all of those, and landed on PJSIP, which, as you know, is another open source project, and we took that into Asterisk. And so that came out from Asterisk 12 onwards, and you can see that's from 2013. So it's been, you know, it's been in a while. It's matured in there. And by the way, if you looked at it a couple of years ago, you'd have found that we were still having people compile PJSIP before they compiled Asterisk. That's all finished now. It all comes in as one block. Asterisk brings PJSIP in. But it's very, very modular. It's built outside of the Asterisk project, and so it's got developers looking after it specifically. It's very portable, very interoperable, and there's lots of different things using it. And it's very mature out there. But it does look different. The configuration does look different. So I just want to spend the last part of our time together by just going through some of the differences. Can you remember in Asterisk's SIP configuration, we have 3 categories of things in the old SIP? Do you remember what they were? Endpoints could either be user, peer, or a friend. Exactly. In fact, friend was a bit of a cheat, because friend just meant that you could see the endpoint as a user or a peer. And without getting into too much detail, generally speaking, a peer was something you sent calls to, and a user was something that sent calls to you. Well, that nomenclature, or that way of doing things, is not how we do things in PJSIP. You can see things are split out into more of a structure, and this reflects the modularity the flexibility and the sophistication of PJ-SIP. You can see we specify the transport separately now. And of course, although we've got UDP, which is the kind of thing we'd expect, it could be TCP, it could be WebSocket, it could be secure WebSocket. So that's very, very flexible now. And you can describe as many different transports as you want. You can see this one is not bound to anything, but of course you can introduce an access control list, and you could have exactly the same transport with different subnets or different ranges called different things, you know, transport 1, transport 2, and so on. Then we've got the endpoint description, and you'll notice that this is not known as a user or a peer or a friend. It's just known as an endpoint. You can tell that by that line that says type equals endpoint. And then you'll notice a few different things. In fact, I'm going to come on to them in a little bit, but I want you to notice two things specifically. There's an auth declaration for authentication, and there's an AOR declaration for an address of record. So this is where to find that endpoint, and this is the authorization credentials. And you'll notice that within the endpoint description, we make use of those things. And by the way, we've called them 6001. They don't have to be called that. We're just doing that for ease of recognition there. So the transport, it's defined in its own section, and it can be placed anywhere in the configuration file, and you can have as many transports as you'd like, making it very, very flexible. And if the endpoint does not specify, then it tends to take the first transport in the list of transports that's in the PJ-SIP configuration file. Looking at the endpoint declaration, there's a few different things to note. Obviously, there's the context, and that's how do you handle an incoming call that comes in via this endpoint in the dial plan. The context just tells you where to start handling that. But here's a very important one to note. The disallow and allow, you'll be familiar with that because that's the same as in the previous SIP. The difference is this. In Chan SIP, if you forgot to do that, it didn't matter. It would just go with the default codec. If you forget to do that in PJ-SIP, it will throw an error. And as you try and make the phone call, it will go, I can't agree a codec, because you didn't declare one. And so this has become a little bit more important now, making sure that you specify the audio codec or video codec that you plan to use. And there's a little note that says that very thing, but it's not defaulted anymore. Then we've got the credentials, the username and password. Now, what did you want to do when you wanted to see the details of a peer in the old SIP? Can you remember the CLI command that you might type? SIP show peer. I'm going to give you a biscuit for that, a cookie, Richard. A Camaillio cookie. Way, well done. How about if you wanted to see the details of a particular peer? SIP show peer and then the name. That's exactly right. So you might say SIP show peer 7001 or SIP show peer David or whatever it was. Again, we don't do that in PJ-SIP anymore. Of course, there's a new command set of PJ-SIP, do this, that and the other. A good one is PJ-SIP list endpoints or PJ-SIP show endpoints. There's two that give you a slightly different view. And of course, if you then go PJ-SIP show endpoint 7001, that gives you all of the details. When it gives you all the details, it tells you which auth, which AOR it's using. And then what you can do is you can say PJ-SIP show auth 7001. And it will give you in great detail the contents of that auth section. So there's more granularity, if you like, now that you can get down into in PJ-SIP for troubleshooting and debugging. Then there's the network location. And what you're going to have is either one or two of these things. If you have max contacts, then what that's allowing is the endpoint to come and register with Asterisk to hand over its IP address. Or if you specifically know the IP address, you can build it in. You'll notice it says max contacts. One of the new facilities that PJ-SIP brings in is, you know the way if you've got your laptop, your mobile phone and your tablet all logged into Skype and somebody calls you, they all ring, doesn't it? Forking, if you like. Well, we couldn't do that in Chan SIP, but we can do that in PJ-SIP. And so now you can have as many physical endpoints registered against this instance as you want. And when you do a PJ-SIP show endpoints, and then 7001, if it's got like 5, the 5 IP addresses that are all registered would show. So there's a bit more granularity there. And the way you would call it from inside the dial plan is just through the PJ-SIP channel. This is the traditional kind of formulation of a dial plan. You use the dial application, dialing through the technology that you're calling, and then with the endpoint, And then, of course, the first option is the timeout, in this case, 20 seconds. So it's very straightforward. You're just dialing through the PJ SIP technology rather than the SIP technology. Okay, and just to put this all together in the way that this works in terms of a call flow, if Doug up the top, whose extension is 205, picks up his phone and dials 200, it first of all comes into PJ SIP now, not SIP, PJ SIP, and the context tells us the way we're going to deal with that call inside the dial plan. And so we go to the inside context, remembering that he's dialed 200, and so as we look down we find that indeed there is an extension 200, and that's dialing through PJ SIP looking for endpoint 200. Comes back here, and you'll see that this particular one has got the max contact. So in other words, we didn't know what the IP address of that phone was until the phone registered with us, as it says just there. Once it's registered, we can send calls to it, of course. And that's the way the call flow goes through those two configurations. Okay, that was all I really wanted to say to you, so it wasn't too painful. Any questions before we summarise our key points? Bearing in mind that there might be more cookies. Yes, sir.
Is real-time available for PJ SIP?
It is, yeah.
It is.
ARA is fully available for PJ SIP, indeed.
Is there documentation for it?
I beg your pardon?
Is there documentation for it online?
Yes, indeed. Just go to... Well, the wiki has been vastly improved by having lots of content added to it.
Okay.
That's the way you improve wikis, isn't it? By putting stuff in it. And you'll find that there is excellent documentation. So if you Googled PJ SIP ARA or PJ SIP in real time, undoubtedly you would get led to a wiki article about that.
All right, thank you.
No problem. Let me give that man a Kamat Ilio cookie.
Any more?
Building up a collection there.
All right, and absolutely perfectly timed, David. There's the mark of a pro.
Oh, we've got another question. Go ahead, sir.
With the max contacts, is the default value if you don't set one?
No, I don't believe there is.
Right,
So you'd want to set it.
right. Is there a plan to make one in future? So it defaults to 2 or 1.
You may be right. I'm not sure of that.
That's all my question.
I mean, I suppose it'd be sensible if it was one. From a security point of view, you want to make it one unless
Yeah, of course.
you really want it to be others.
Yeah.
Of course. Yeah, mate, I would... Let me look that up rather than be rash, and I'll make contact with you.
And you can still make templates. You can still make templates. So
Yeah, absolutely, in the
so
way that you've always done in the configuration file.
So we just set max contacts equals 1, and then use that template everywhere. And hey presto, you've got max contacts 1 everywhere.
Indeed, the power of the exclamation mark and the doings. Any other questions? In that case, let's summarise that bad boy.
David, thank you very much. Big hand
Well,
for David.
hold on, we've got to do the summary yet, Simon.
Oh, sorry, I thought you finished.
Calm
All
it,
right,
calm
shut
it.
up. So I take everything back I said about timings and pros and all of that kind of thing.
So, the main message is Sangoma committed to keeping Asterisk and FreePBX open source. We looked at the FreePBX update and we found that the backup has extended up and down in terms of the versioning there, and we got GraphSQL. And the Asterisk update, lots of video goodness in there, but also a bedding in of the things that you saw come out in Asterisk 15 now hardened in the LTS of Asterisk 16. And lastly, PJ SIP, if you're not using it, you really should move over. There's a lot of documentation to help you move over from ChanSIP to PJ SIP. There's even some wizards to actually move your configurations over to try and make it a little bit easier for you. It's actually worth the investment of your time and your energy in doing that. There's more granularity in PJ SIP in terms of the logging and the debugging as well. So that really is all I had to say, other than if you want any hardware, Richard is your man there. Richard has all sorts of hardware as well as some commercial software offerings as well, and we also have very good training if you want to get into a bit more troubleshooting in the world of Asterisk. And that really is the end. Thank you very much.
Just on the training point, we did actually advertise some courses here, didn't we?
We did, and there's nothing to stop us advertising some more.
So if there's any appetite amongst you guys for that, then
in this very room, but not as full as this.
No, set up as a classroom,
exactly.
and and it was designed around that to some extent. So if there's an appetite, let us know, and we'll sort out, You, David, it
Indeed,
would be
that-
your good self delivering it, wouldn't it?
I would love to, and that applies both to Asterisk under the hood stuff, but also to FreePBX and PBExact now. We can do all of that.
David,
Shall I let
thank you very
Dan come
much.
and